Most people think mold is something you fight with chemicals, bleach, sprays, expensive air purifiers humming in the background 24 hours a day. Entire companies make billions, convincing homeowners that once mold enters a house, it becomes a permanent war. But a few years ago, a contractor renovating an old lakeside cabin noticed something strange. One side of the basement was covered in thick black mold. The other side, despite the same humidity, same temperature, same darkness, was almost completely clean. The only difference? A thin copper grounding cable running along the wall. And what happened next sounded too simple to be real. If you've ever walked into a room and smelled that damp, heavy odor hiding behind paint or under carpet, you already know the feeling. Maybe it's the bathroom ceiling that keeps growing dark spots no matter how many times you scrub it. Maybe it's the basement that feels wet even when nothing is leaking. Or maybe it's the cough that gets worse at night. The allergies that seem to appear from nowhere. The constant feeling that the air inside your own home is somehow stale and unhealthy. Most people assume mold is just part of modern life. You clean it, it comes back. You repaint, it returns. It becomes this endless cycle of temporary fixes. But then you hear stories from older homes, cabins, workshops, even barns, where certain areas somehow stayed dry and resistant for decades with almost no modern products at all. And that contrast raises a strange question. Were people unknowingly using something we stopped paying attention to? In this video, we're going to break down exactly what copper may be doing, why certain builders and restoration experts quietly still use it today, and why the science behind it is far less mysterious than it first sounds. Because honestly, when I first heard about this idea, I thought it belonged in the same category as internet myths and late-night miracle hacks. A single copper cable stopping mold? It sounded ridiculous. But the deeper you look, the more interesting the story becomes. The discovery didn't happen in a laboratory. It happened during restoration work on older structures near coastal regions where moisture damage is constant. One restoration worker noticed that wood beams connected to old copper grounding strips seemed to age differently than surrounding materials. Less odor, less visible fungal growth, fewer soft spots. At first, nobody thought much of it. Copper had already been used for plumbing and electrical work for generations. But over time, small observations kept repeating themselves. Areas with exposed copper often showed lower microbial buildup compared to similar untreated areas nearby. Then researchers started examining copper surfaces inside hospitals. And what they found surprised even them. Copper has natural antimicrobial properties. In simple terms, certain microbes struggle to survive on it. Unlike plastic or ordinary drywall surfaces, where bacteria and fungi can remain active for long periods, copper ions interfere with the survival process of many microorganisms. Some studies found that copper surfaces reduced microbial contamination dramatically compared to standard materials. That doesn't mean copper magically sterilizes a house, but it does mean the material itself behaves differently from most surfaces surrounding us every day. What's fascinating is that older civilizations may have understood parts of this long before modern science explained it. Ancient cultures stored water in copper vessels. Ships used copper lining to resist biological growth. Farmers sometimes used copper mixtures to protect crops from fungal damage. Even before microscopes existed, people noticed patterns. They didn't necessarily know why something worked, they only knew that it did. Then over time, modern construction shifted toward cheaper synthetic materials, drywall, plastics, compressed wood products, many of which trap moisture far more easily than older breathable materials ever did. And here's where things get important. Mold doesn't appear randomly, it needs conditions, moisture, darkness, poor airflow, organic material to feed on. That's why bathrooms, basements, attics, and air conditioning systems become perfect environments for it. The real issue isn't that mold is attacking homes. It's that modern homes often create ideal conditions for growth without homeowners realizing it. Sealed windows reduce ventilation, cheap materials absorb moisture, air systems recycle humid air through enclosed spaces. Then companies sell increasingly complicated products to manage the symptoms rather than addressing the environment itself. Now, to be completely clear, no legitimate scientist would say that a copper cable alone can eliminate all mold forever. That would be misleading. But certain applications involving copper may help reduce the conditions that allow microbial buildup to thrive, especially when combined with moisture control and airflow improvements. And that's where the internet sometimes twists a real scientific observation into an unrealistic miracle claim. The truth is actually more interesting because it's grounded in real-world logic. Think of mold like weeds in a garden. Spraying chemicals may kill visible patches temporarily, but if the soil conditions stay perfect for weeds, they simply return. Copper works more like changing part of the environment itself. Copper ions create a surface that's naturally hostile to many microbes. Some HVAC systems now use copper components around condensation areas because moisture buildup inside cooling systems can become breeding grounds for mold and bacteria. Certain hospitals install copper alloy surfaces in high contact environments for similar reasons. Not because copper is magic, but because biology reacts differently around it. So where does the copper cable idea come from? Mostly from grounding and management setups used in older utility spaces. Some homeowners and builders place copper strips or grounding wires in damp environments where condensation repeatedly forms. Copper itself doesn't remove water from the air, but in certain situations, it may reduce microbial persistence around surfaces that constantly collect moisture. Combined with airflow and humidity reduction, it can contribute to cleaner conditions over time. The simplest practical approach is surprisingly basic. First, identify the true moisture source. This is the step most people skip. If water is entering through a leak, no material on Earth will permanently stop mold until the leak is fixed. Next comes airflow. Small ventilation improvements often matter more than expensive treatments. Then, humidity control. Keeping indoor humidity under control dramatically changes mold growth potential. And finally, strategic use of antimicrobial materials, like copper in high condensation areas, can add another layer of protection. Some people install thin copper mesh near HVAC drip areas. Others use copper tape or copper grounding strips in problem-prone corners where moisture repeatedly forms. In bathrooms, copper fixtures often resist microbial buildup better than certain coated materials. Even simple changes like improving air circulation behind furniture against exterior walls can make a huge difference because trapped moisture is often the hidden trigger. One homeowner in Oregon described constantly fighting mold in a basement office. Every winter the smell returned, paint bubbled, books became damp. Instead of spending thousands on repeated chemical treatments, he focused on three things: reducing humidity, increasing airflow, and replacing certain moisture-prone materials near the wall with copper-lined components and breathable surfaces. 6 months later, the odor was dramatically reduced. Not because copper performed a miracle, but because the environment itself changed. And there's another layer to this story most people never hear. Mold isn't always visible. Sometimes the biggest issue is the air itself feeling heavy or stale. Modern buildings are incredibly efficient at trapping indoor air. That efficiency saves energy, but it also means moisture and particles linger longer than they used to. Older homes breathe naturally through tiny gaps and porous materials. Newer homes seal everything tightly. The result is comfort on one hand and stagnant air on the other. That's why the real lesson here may not be about copper alone at all. It may be about remembering that simple materials and environmental balance often matter more than endless products. The healthiest spaces usually share similar qualities: airflow, dryness, sunlight, breathable materials, and fewer hidden moisture traps. Of course, there are limitations. If mold infestation is severe, professional remediation may still be necessary. Certain toxic mold situations should absolutely be handled carefully. Copper also won't stop water intrusion, flooding, or structural damage. And not every internet claim about grounding wires eliminating mold forever is scientifically supported. Skepticism is healthy, but dismissing every simple solution simply because it sounds old-fashioned can also make us overlook genuinely useful ideas. What makes this topic fascinating is how often modern life conditions us to assume complex problems require expensive answers. Sometimes they do. But sometimes the biggest improvements come from understanding the environment around us a little better. Moisture, airflow, materials, light. These things quietly shape health every single day inside our homes. Maybe that's why stories like this spread so quickly online. Not because people believe in magic cables, but because deep down many are tired of temporary fixes. They want solutions that make intuitive sense, solutions connected to how homes actually function rather than endless cycles of chemicals and replacements. And maybe the real forbidden part isn't the science itself. Maybe it's the fact that simple ideas rarely sound profitable. There's no excitement in telling people to improve airflow, reduce humidity, use better materials, and understand how microbes behave. But those quiet, practical changes often matter far more than flashy promises. So the next time you smell that damp odor creeping through a room, instead of asking, what product can cover this up, maybe ask a different question. What conditions are allowing this to happen? Because once you understand the environment, the solution often becomes much clearer. And if you've ever tried unusual methods to fight mold, or noticed strange differences in older buildings compared to modern homes, drop your experience in the comments below. Some of the most interesting discoveries start with ordinary people simply paying attention. And sometimes the smallest details, like an old copper cable running quietly through a wall, end up revealing far bigger lessons about how we live.